So, Sobs and Throbs, Chapter 10, 6 Days of Separation. The first day. The overnight atmosphere of gloom and distraction continued throughout the day. The master began conveying remarks about coming out of his long confinement and commencing to take food since the very morning. During one of the many discussions held between the master and the disciples and amongst themselves about Ali, two of them made a bold offer to approach Ali's father in spite of all the happenings and try again to bring him round. The master gave his consent and allowed the pair 7 days of grace in which to arrive at a final conclusion. Accordingly, the two gentlemen left for Bombay in the afternoon. In all the 6 years of my close contact with the master, I have often marked a great peculiarity about his actions and words, but the one witnessed this day, I dare say, would beat them all. On the one hand, His Holiness continued instructing the authorities concerned in continuing all activities as usual, as if nothing untoward had happened. Nay, he even sanctioned many costly alterations and additions to be made to the existing premises of the ashram and school by way of improvements, and asked the authorities to make fresh purchases and involve themselves in various commitments in this connection. While in the same breath, on the other hand, he ordered another group of his disciples for the close up of the institution, lock, stock, and barrel. Thus, the contrary workings of these two groups began to come into operation simultaneously from this day to the great bewilderment of the rest. And this state of affairs continued for the following 5 days, when both sides were ready for the fateful final command to be issued at the expiry of the 7 days of grace. It was exactly 45 minutes past 5 that the master had last stepped out of his confinement after 107 days of rigid self imprisonment. But for the black clouds of Ali's going away, the master's coming out amongst them, no doubt, could have been a direct outburst of glorious sunshine for the boys and disciples. Still, still, there was no lack of enthusiasm. The master was soon conducted down the hill on which the mayor ashram was then situated to Mehrabad proper in a gaily decorated rickshaw. One of the master's seats at Mehrabad at Arangown is situated along the public road under a neem tree in the shape of a huge box-like wooden room near the sacred fireplace called Duni, which is a small round pit generally maintained about the seats of Hindu and Muslim saints alike, though its maintenance alone does not imply of one being a genuine saint. This particular Duni was always fed with round logs that generally smoldered and were never likely to give out a flame, even when violently disturbed by a foreign agency. Just as the master's rickshaw passed the Duni on this particular day, it suddenly burst out into a distinct flame. I remember having particularly witnessed this extraordinary phenomenon as I chanced to look at it just at the right moment. Many others also remember having seen it. There was no one close to it just then, and the moment the rickshaw passed onward, that peculiar outburst died down immediately, leaving no traces of any chemical disturbance. It was found smoldering as usual, giving out an almost imperceptible smoke. I have not gone into the details of this incident merely for its being a rare phenomenon, but because it has a direct bearing on the main issue of this chapter, as will be seen from the following facts. After passing a few minutes here and there, inquiring of the various disciples as to how they were faring, the master retraced his steps and for the first time, going round the dooney, sat down opposite to it quietly for about 15 minutes. Just before getting up from there, he was pleased to enlighten the disciples with a very suggestive hint. The dooney has just conveyed to me a message. Continue and go on with the work. Marvin, could you unmute and continue?
Although, as mentioned above, the dual workings of making and unmaking of the institution had continued for 5 days. That hint was sufficient for many of the disciples to take it for granted that the institution for the present had passed through the danger zone and would be continued. A telegram was received from the pair who had undertaken to achieve the impossible and had gone to Bombay the other day. It contained a single word, hopes, which gave a happy surprise to those who heard it. The second day, the master was indisposed throughout the day, but towards the evening, he was marked to be very restless. For a few minutes, he would retire into the lower crypt-like chamber, only to come out again, going down, coming up, standing, sitting, sleeping, reclining, and in fact, every minute changing his position and pose, every minute changing his position and pose, the master kept on conveying through feeble signs that he was dying. His Holiness looked every inch a man breathing his last. By sunset, there was a peculiar vacant look in his half-closed eyes, and his hands and feet were cold and almost limp and lifeless. The third day, another telegram was received from Bombay as follows, quote, Ali much distracted, Syed, his father, angry, community against, and the previous message of hope was thus shattered, and with it many castles in the air built by the enthusiastic disciples tottered down. But in the case of the master, it was quite the contrary. He was found to be in a very pleasant mood, and even went to the length of allowing his little lovers to dress him as Sri Krishna. Nay, the master also conceded their request and sat for a snapshot with the fantastic dress on. The fourth day, whatever little hope that still flickered in some of the most optimistic hearts about the return of the hero was extinguished on receipt of this telegram. Seen Syed, boy not sent, starting tomorrow night. Fifth day, the day's post brought a plainly addressed envelope for Mr. Kaikushru Afsari. It contained a few touching lines from the hero. It was written in Persian and is preserved to this date as a treasure by Mr. Afsari. The following is a free translation of the same. O Meher Baba, in the service of Aga Kaikushru Aspandiar, I beg to tell you that since the day they carried me away, I am in a sad mood and feeling desolate and dejected. On the night that I sat in the train, I was seeing Baba amidst a halo of luster. And throughout that night, whenever I felt like weeping, this sight helped me to maintain my composure. In the morning, we arrived at Bombay. They carried me to a bath and applied henna to my humble hands, which were always kissed by Baba. I wept at the time, but they applied the henna on my hands forcibly. Since then, to this date, I cannot eat my food. At night, too, I cannot sleep before 12 or 2 o'clock. Tell Hazrat Baba I will come after 4 days. In awake state, I always see Baba. Also, while sleeping, I see Baba in a halo of light. O Kaikushru, may I give my life for you. Be enjoying the Meher Ashram atmosphere on my behalf. Come to the help of a poor soul, a wretched creature in the eyes of all in the world. By God, if I had 2 rupees, I would have come to Pune, at least to be nearer to Baba. Read these lines to Baba. I'll skip trying to read that. Translation, that is, the apex of the highest heaven is your abode. The home of truth is your resting place. The world is illumined by your divine light. Your erect and graceful stature is like the garden cypress. With a touch of your hand, the dead have been restored to life. This is because of the power of Masiahi. Resuscitation you have. From the heat of the fire of your love, I am ever boiling like a pot of water. Even if my bones decay, your love will never be effaced from my soul. The 6th day, the unsuccessful pair from Bombay returned to Mehrabad this morning, dejected and defeated. In spite of their best attempts and persuasions, they reported that not only Ali's father, but many other prominent members of his community also opposed Ali's return, and that the boy's return was impossible. Throughout the day, the master looked all absorbed in the thoughts of the hero, and even when the principal of the school approached him for certain instructions, the latter got a curt reply, "Do as you like." It was the last day of the 7 days of grace. Ali must return on the following day, or the whole of the institution would cease to exist. The group of workers in charge of the unmaking department got the tools for the wholesale demolition ready. The majority of the disciples did not even dare to think of the morrow. All had failed. Will the master do it himself? But before I reply this question in the following 2 chapters, I would just give a fresh example of the master's peculiar actions witnessed this evening, and perhaps some readers may make them out after reading about that which happened the same moment in Bombay. To the great bewilderment of all, the master instructed one of the 2 disciples that had returned from Bombay to go there again, and in face of all the reported fierce antagonism, to try once more to bring round Ali's father. This was very peculiar, inasmuch as there was not a single individual who could see any possibility of success. Even the gentleman concerned could see no chance of any good coming out of this move, but merely for the sake of obeying the master's command. He left Mehrabad in the evening to catch the night train to Bombay at about 9:30 at night. Quite contrary to his usual practice of retiring to his seat, the master suddenly walked up to the school premises, went into the classroom which Ali used to attend, and sat over the very seat that the hero occupied when he was here. The master remained seated there for about 15 minutes in a very contemplative mood. Mr. Abseri, who was near the master, says that he could not help feeling at that time that although bodily the master was there, internally he was elsewhere. A sort of vacancy about the master's eyes during these few minutes was unmistakable. Chapter 11. The first wonderful escape. The letter of Ali that I have reproduced in the last chapter speaks volumes about the pangs of separation that the hero suffered during the first few days of his forced stay in Bombay. Yet, a few words about the subsequent suffering of Ali will not be out of place here. The most noteworthy point in this connection was the boy's wonderful and horrible abstinence from food for 6 solid days. Of all the facts that I had gathered for this narrative, this was the only one that raised doubts in me about its exact correctness. To leave no possibility of a doubt, with the master's permission, I questioned Ali personally about it on the 11th of October, when the boy calmly and in an unconcerned, matter-of-fact tone corroborated my notes. In all these 6 days, the enigma of a boy who had taken only 2 cups of tea, 1 egg, and 2 slices of bread. But there is a little story about how he took even this much nourishment. The egg, he said, was actually forced down his throat, perhaps with the idea that once his vow of strict vegetarianism was broken, he might get free of the inexplicable influence of the master. Or perhaps it might have been administered as an antidote to cure him of the infidelity to his religion, since I know of Orthodox Muslims who are prejudiced enough to hold that merely the abstinence from animal food is a violation of Islam. While the 2 slices of bread were taken by Ali on the night he escaped, in the enthusiasm of the near prospect of reaching the master again, and thus, really speaking, Ali had remained only on 2 cups of tea during this memorable separation. To realize the full significance of these lines, one should at least remain without food just for 24 hours and then read them to get an idea as to what it means for a 15-year-old healthy boy to go without food in such a way. In spite of my early age, I have had the misfortune or good fortune of losing many a dear one, some of whom live evergreen in my memory for the mutual regard that we had amongst us. And I have also tasted some bitter disappointments at the hands of fate. But for all these, I never remember ever having gone without food for more than a few hours at the most.
Thanks, Marb. Mahu, could you unmute and continue?
Ali's father, excuse me, Ali's father was naturally so exasperated and nonplussed with this inexplicable abstinence of the boy, that once during these 6 days, in the presence of many people, he took a big knife in his hands and with a threatening gesture commanded Ali to partake of food, particularly meat and eggs. But besides his unusual mettle, Ali had the divine fire of love blazing merrily in his little bosom. What did he care for knives and swords? Kill me, I won't, was the only answer that this exceptionally brave boy gave out, unflinchingly to his angry father. At this, somebody was wise enough and had sufficient presence of mind to gently but firmly take away the knife in the mid-air from the angry man's clasp. But even this convincing proof of his son's great devotion and love for his ideal failed to open the eyes of the father to facts. The gentleman tried another way. One of the prominent leaders of his community and some elder relatives and friends were brought in in the shape of an awe-inspiring deputation to Ali. Some were fat, some were red, and some had bloodshot eyes and thundering voices in this group. The finer element amongst them first tried to bring round Ali to their way of thinking with many soft words and tempting offers, but they failed. A few amongst them then used threats, but without success. Then the trump card was played. One amongst them, who had remained at Mehrabad for some time, but through selfish motives had to beat a sorry retreat, was brought forward to spit out his spiteful bluster against the Meher Ashram and its august founder. Of course, considering Ali's education, age, and then mental agitation, the boy could not reply point to point, surrendered as he was by so many pairs of unsympathetic eyes, yet one of his replies, quote, "That fellow is a liar," uttered with the conviction of inborn truth, simply took the breath out of those present. In spite of these threats and temptations, not to speak of the various other allurements that the city like Bombay is full of, Ali remained firm and unshaken and proved to the hilt his divine love for the master. Besides being despised, laughed at, and subjected to much petty harassment by his relations, the 6 days of his life in Bombay during this period were no better than those of a prisoner. He was never left alone. Wherever he went or sat, there was somebody to watch over him. Even at night, the father kept a vigilant watch over the boy and kept awake when Ali slept. Or if he felt himself very sleepy, he used to lock the door of the room carefully from inside before retiring. Page 67, the wonderful, just love it, I'm gonna read the title. The first wonderful escape. On the night of the 1st of March, Ali had a very wonderful dream. In this dream, Ali found himself on one of the platforms of the Victoria terminus, the terminal station of the GIP railway at Bombay. A train was ready there to steam out of the station, and the sign of Madras Mail was prominently displayed about it. At last, the right moment has arrived, thought the boy in the dream, and he began to run to board the train. But it was too late. Before he could get in, the train left the platform. Horrified at this failure, he simply dashed into a person that he dreamed as standing by, and then turned to see who he was. To his great surprise, Ali saw it. It was none other than Master himself. Stupefied, Ali stood like a statue and began to stare at the master, who told him, echoed. Don't you know the Madras mail leaves at 10 o'clock? And with this short but very suggestive sentence, the master disappeared. This time, Alice's horror in the dream knew no bounds. With the half-stifled scream, he sat up on his bed, only to realize that it was but a dream. His ever-watchful father was at once by his side and inquired as to what the matter was, adding, "You have been very noisy and restless just now in sleep." But in spite of the great excitement that this realistic dream had caused to him, Ali did not lose his presence of mind and was wise enough not to make his father the wiser for the dream, and shook off the inquisitive old man with some suitable answer. Of course, he could not sleep after the dream. The master had clearly given him a hint in it, as if to say, "It's time for you to think of the return." Nay, even had shown him from which station, by what train, and at what time to start. From this moment, Ali became all the more less restless and distracted in the dark hours of his separation. How to escape was the uppermost thought with him now. It was as if the master had added fuel to the fire of separation by conveying him hints to come back without providing an opportunity to do so. How am I to escape from the constant watch over me, not to speak of want money? I haven't a single pie on me. Such and the like thoughts began to race through his already reeling head. But the darkest hour is nearest the dawn. Dawn has often been proved to be too true. The very evening, Ali got what he wanted. The master had also provided a practical opportunity.
Thank you, Maha. Beautiful. Ernie, could you unmute, please, and continue?
It so happened that on this particular,
trying to get my volume right. Is that good?
You're loud and clear. It's good. Yep. Thanks, Ernie.
Okay. It so happened that on this particular evening, the 2nd of March, Ollie's father found it necessary to go out on some business, and he left the boy in charge of his partner at one of his tea shops. Now, as luck would have it, this partner had sometime felt like going for necessities. Who to leave in charge of the counter was the only question that affected him.
Sorry.
Of course, there could be none better than the son of his partner for this purpose. Not knowing as to what was going on in Ollie's mind, since that morning, the gentleman asked the hero to take charge of the counter in his absence. "Collect the money carefully," he shouted over his shoulder, and was off. To think Ali would let go this God-sent chance to forget or underrate the terrible restlessness of his heart. The moment the poor unsuspecting partner was out of sight, Ali dived his hand I'm sorry, I've lost my view. I have somehow lost the image of the.
Did it go up into the corner, maybe?
Should I go to zoom ratio?
Yeah, just double click on the right top corner. Maybe it shrank to a small one and it enlarged the screen. If there is a square you have on the right top corner, double click on that.
Or click on the zoom icon.
Yeah, on Zoom meeting, there is a actually square on top right corner.
Yeah.
I am so sorry. I have somehow. I see the view icon, and I see the right arrow and the left arrow. I've got.
Yeah, go a little bit top. There is a light gray area.
I see what happened. It's being blocked. Okay. Well, come on. I can't click on the box to open it because of.
You can move the. You can move the videos of the individuals, us, just by clicking on them and moving them wherever you want.
I have really messed this up somehow. I have no idea how.
Should we just have somebody else start and then Ernie can?
Yeah, hopefully I can find my way back.
Ernie, make sure when you do the view, the standard is checkmarked. Just do the view pull down menu, the standard is checkmarked. It goes back to the standard. Just so.
Yeah, what I had something saying view options, and it was blocking the box where I could enlarge the screen. So I'm going to probably restart and come back.
Thanks, Ern. Betty, go ahead from.
I think it's up to think Ali would let. Isn't that right?
Yeah.
Ali would let go this God-sent chance is to forget or underrate the terrible restlessness of his heart. The moment the poor unsuspecting partner was out of sight, Ali dived his hand in the cash box and slipped all the loose coins that he could gather in his small fist into his coat pocket. So exciting, gosh.
Yeah.
First wonderful escape. Snatched a book lying there with the other hand and shot out of the shop like an arrow. He only took breath again when he had reached a fairly safe distance and then counted what he had been able to take from the cash box. It was about rupees 3 and annas 10. Not much, but enough for my purpose, said Ali to himself. But he could not account for the book that he had in his hand, and still holding the same, he proceeded. Did he come straight to the station? No, it was unlike Ali and his moral characteristics as described in the earlier chapters. The reader might have forgotten, but Ali did not. He remembered his lost comrade, Mohammed Hussein. Let's see. Something. Oh.
Yeah, sorry.
Okay.
My computer did something, unbidden.
Ali knew he was running a grave risk, but the brave boy faced it. He went straight to Mohammed Hussein's place near the Crawford market and found him. Alas, like Ali, the former was also under a strict watch. Consequently, Mohammed Hussein's brother would not leave the two chums alone. Ali began to think rapidly and got an ingenious idea. Talking at random, as if killing time, Although for Ali every moment meant freedom or bondage, the boy took hold of a matchbox and, as if fidgeting foolishly, he scribbled out these words: "I am escaping. Coming?" Then, through another successful ruse, Ali managed to pass on the matchbox to Muhammad Hussein. The latter did not require to be told further. He had already guessed Ali's intentions and so glanced at the dramatic message at the first opportunity. But no, came the answer through a half suppressed signal. Poor boy, he did not find it possible, or perhaps, who knows, he might not have liked to endanger Ali's own prospects of escape through delay. By this time, Muhammad Hussein's brother's suspicion was aroused a bit, and just as Ali was on the point of walking away, he asked, "Where are you off to, Ali?" and fixed a searching stare on the latter's face. But Ali again proved that he had plenty of pluck about him. He at once assumed an unconcerned look and blurted out, "I am going to my cousin's shop near Victoria Terminus, and see, here's the book that I want to show him." Even that book had served some purpose, but instead of going to the cousin's shop, Ali came to the booking office at Victoria Terminus station and booked himself for Ahmednagar. Inexperienced as he was, Ali found it difficult to locate the platform from which the Madras mail left, and were it not for the dream, he would have certainly missed the train. However, inquiring about it, Ali reached the train. Lest it might happen as it did in the dream last night, Ali was cautious not to lose a moment in getting into the train, although there was plenty of time on hand. Feeling insecure, he managed to enlist the sympathy of a fellow passenger and kept himself well under the cover of the latter's luggage till the train had passed Kalyan, the first halt. Throughout that night, the night on which the master occupied Ali's seat in school, as described in the last chapter, Ali remained wide awake, looking through the open window of the onrushing train, heedless of the cold and cutting winds. It was as if his eager and longing eyes were trying to shoot through the yawning space to drop down on the lotus feet of the master. Golly! Chapter 12, Truth Tells. The dawn of the 3rd of March smiled on Mehrabad as usual, but there was hardly a face that was smiling that morning. It was the last day of the 7 days of grace. There were many who thought it was the last day of the Meher Ashram's brilliant but short life. None cared to look at the figure of a boy hastening up the hill in all earnest about 7:30 in the morning. The figure went straight to the master's seat without even exchanging a single word or glance with anybody. Needless to say, it was the hero. For all the violent beats of his heart, Ali was considerate enough to remain quiet and collected by the main front window of the master's upper room, taking every care to avoid disturbance to the master, who had not yet come out of his retirement. It did not take long for Mr. Afsari to find out Ali's presence there, since he was one of the attendants over the lovelorn boys, and was generally required to be present near the master's seat every morning. To say he was pleased is a poor compliment to him. I would like to say Afsari simply went mad with joy at this unexpected sight of the hero whom he succeeded in persuading to accompany him to the dining hall. Let me see Baba first was the gist of all that Ali could say. The boy looked the very picture of a fish out of water for the sight of the master. You will see him presently, Sari assured him, but take a little refreshment. Can I ask, it talks about the upper room. Is this in a building that still exists? Do we know that?
Yes, yes.
Yeah. Is it the
East
tower?
room, East room.
Oh,
Now is the
oh,
library. Part of it is the library, and
okay.
behind it is a
Yeah.
room
And
that
of the tower building.
women used to stay.
Yeah.
Yeah, up the tower.
Okay, right. There was no need for the boy to say he had been fasting all these days. His sunken eyes and haggard looks were enough to disclose the fact. Ali obeyed his teacher's word and partook of a little from the bowl of cream offered to him, evidently to please his very kind teacher rather than enjoy it himself. The news of the hero's return spread in the whole of the colony faster than the wind and caused many a heart to take a sigh of relief. At about 8 o'clock, the master came out of his retirement, but here my pen is simply powerless to keep pace with my thoughts in describing the touching scene that followed. Rather, it is the work of a poet or painter. I would say this much, that for about a half an hour, the master of divinity, oh dear, and
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 the slave of love
slave of love
were
grew
one.
one in each other. Oh my goodness.
How
Have a good cry,
beautiful.
Betty, and
Yeah.
we'll have
You
Ernie
got it,
come
Betty.
back.
Oh my gosh.
Could you unmute Ernie and continue while Betty's weeping?
Okay, I've still got something strange going on here, but I think I can get it to where I can
However,
read.
when it was,
Okay. However, when it was generally known that Ali's appearance at Mehrabad was due to his having taken French leave and not as a result and not as a result of his father's common sense and fidelity to his word of honor, the presence of the hero was not considered as quite a very happy one. He could not yet be considered as having returned to the mayor ashram, but was taken simply as uninvited by very welcome guest of the master. The main question was still in the balance, and the master too continued conveying the threat that if Ali remains, all remain. If he goes, everything goes. Yet for the time being, the immediate black clouds over the colony were dispelled as no time limit now remained fixed for the dismantling of the noble institution. The master went beyond the expectation of and all at Mehrabad in according a rousing reception to Ali on this memorable day. First of all, the boy was presented with a fine and rich embroidered shawl to be put on his shabby dress, since the ashram uniform could not be given to him in the absence of his father's consent. Then Ali was garlanded and taken round the school by the master, who kept him all the time by his side. At dinner time, the master made Ali and some of his other little lovers sit around him and fed them all with his own august hands, just as a proud mother would feed her happy children. Ali, of course, got the lion's share of the master's attention. Morsels of food made specially rich with the addition of fresh butter were shoveled into the hero's mouth by the master to the point of almost overfeeding him. By this time, the only somber point that marred the happy situation faded away, and the bright ray of hope that reached Mehrabad in the shape of a yellow envelope. It contained a telegraphic message from the gentleman whom the master had sent to Bombay only the other day. And as mentioned in the last chapter, by way of an example of the master's peculiar workings, the message said, Ali's father willing to sign, that is, sign a fresh bond of agreement to let Ali remain in the Meher ashram for a fixed period. The peculiar action had proved a prophetic work. The boy had arrived here, and the ashram emissary had reached there just in time to strike the iron when it was hot. After the receipt of this telegram, the atmosphere became all the more cheerful and bright. The master, too, seemed to have become quite free of his concerned looks regarding the future. All when one of the disciples suggested the possibility of an 11th hour failure, the master only smiled and made that it's all right now. In the evening, the master once again allowed himself to be dressed fantastically in the guise of that picturesque but no less perfect Hindu master, Krishna, by his little lovers, just as he had done on the 28th of February, the third day of separation, as if by way of rehearsal for this very occasion, and went round the colony keeping all prominently by his side. The master even went to the length of taking out the crown and placing the same on Ali's head for some time. Then again, for an hour or so, Ali transformed into a fairy tale picture by the master, who made him put on some multicolored brocades and led him round the playground, where the rest of the ashramites were enjoying their daily recreation. In short, throughout that day, the master and Ali were found together side by side, and the latter was constantly eulogized by the master in the presence of all. The next day, the question of Mr. R.K. Irani's proposed visit to Europe, which had been shelved during these few tumultuous days, was put up for discussion, and the gentleman was finally instructed to finish up the arrangements for setting out on this memorable mission. All's well that ends well is no doubt true, but the disastrous results that emanate from all before it ends well are not always easily blotted out. In writing about Ali's return to Mehrabad, I have so far been trying to make the best of a bad bargain that I can no longer help turning the other side of the coin. Although Ali had returned, and once again there were prospects of the revival of the divine blaze of love, yet that something had seriously gone amiss in the master's internal workings could not be denied. One of the master's earlier remarks in this connection, it will all have to be done afresh, led us to think that the mishap caused in his workings through the untimely forced exit of Ali from the institution almost amounted to a complete disruption of them. Hence, no wonder that along with the holiday atmosphere on this day, 4th of March, the second day of Ali's return, the boys and disciples were greatly pained at the sight of the master's inexplicable yet very prominent fits of agonies. Now and then the master looked as if suffering from some terrible shocks internally, since otherwise there was no sign of any physical illness about his person. The two most prominent and the most terrible of such peculiar fits were witnessed at about 3:30 in the afternoon and at 9 o'clock at night, respectively. Each of these shocks lasted for about 45 minutes. And during these periods, the master seemed to be almost in the grips of death, but was seen simply writhing in pain all the time from an unseen malady. That same evening, when almost all had retired for the night, the long expected gentleman, Ali's father, at last turned up. There are very few who know as to what transpired on that fateful night. In spite of all that had happened and all that he had heard, Mr. Said Haji Muhammad proved no less unreasonable than he was on the day on which he snatched away Ali from ashram. It was Mr. Hafsari, again, who had to grapple with this personification of silly prejudices for 6 solid hours that night. From 11 o'clock at night till the early hours of the dawn, the duel of words continued between the two. This time, Ali's father's main complaint was that it was owing to the ashram authorities tutoring and underhand tricks that Ali had run away from him. But he could not prove that simply because it was a pure falsehood and imagination based on rumors and prejudiced conclusions. In the end, the stubborn unreasonableness of the gentleman was too much even for the patient Afsari. He gave up further reasoning and persuasions with the final remark: "For God's sake, take away your son. We have had enough trouble about him. Neither the master nor the institution, nor anyone amongst us, the workers, are out to gain anything in the least from the boy's presence here. On the contrary, it is for his own benefit that we have been trying so strenuously. No good will come out of his forced stay here." And concluding this last sentence, he actually walked away from the place to report the breakup of the negotiations to the master. However, these simple but true words hit the mark. This time it was Ali's father who had to play the part of a pleader. He at once sent somebody in the wake of the exasperated Afsari, who was already halfway to the master's seat. The latter came back, but was now on the warpath. "What do you want? Why did you call me back?" were the two curt inquiries with which he greeted Ali's father, in place of his polite pleadings and persuasions that he had almost exhausted during the last sitting.
Thank
Ali's
you. Thank you, Ernie. Rosalie, please.
Yes, please, Rosalie. Ali's father seemed to be struggling between two opposite emotions. And in this excitement, it did not take long for him to blurt out one of the real causes underlying his insistence in taking away Ali from the ashram. Quotes, "I believe," he said, "there is nothing wrong here and that you mean good for my boy. But you don't know how that of taunts me and talks about this institution. What a
I guess
pity."
those, Rosalie, those dots probably mean a curse, right? Like a son of a bitch or something.
I don't have any idea. We'll just have to leave it to our imagination, which we're good at. The curse goes on, right? "What a pity," cried out Afsari, "that just because a good-for-nothing busybody talks nonsense, you forget to use your own common sense." It was now nearly 5 o'clock in the morning, the time of the ashramites, including the hero, who had been sleeping all the while, quite unaware of the trouble going on for his sake, to get up, that his father at last signed the stamped bond, agreeing not to remove Ali from the Meher ashram for 1 year under any circumstances. After this happy ending of the all-night conference, Mr. Apsari went to report the same to the master, and, as expected, found him waiting patiently in the upper room. The master had remained seated the whole night and only retired to the lower chamber after having heard Mr. Apsari's final report. Truth tells, but has to suffer too. As soon as the first morning bell made the ashramite boys come out of their beds, Ali was given the good news. But still, it was a task to persuade him to see his father. However, he was conducted down the hill and presented to his father. At first, the latter tried to bluff him and said some harsh words, but Ali remained calm and collected, and in no uncertain terms denied any tutoring and trick on the part of the ashram authorities. Quotes, "Father, I like to stay here," end quotes, was the main burden of his song. With the departure of Ali's father that same morning, the atmosphere became once again normal, and preparations for a picnic party in celebration of the happy occasion were begun in right earnest. The following day, the 6th of March, according to the fine prearrangements, the master, boys, teachers, and disciples all drove in specially engaged motor buses to the Happy Valley, the most scenic spot about Ahmednagar, at a distance of about 15 miles from Narrabad. It is rightly remembered as the Aga Ali Day, and a great holiday it was, especially for the boys. They were allowed the freedom of playing and strolling all over the beautiful valley throughout that day. Besides a special dinner and supper, the boys were also treated with tea and dainty edibles in the afternoon. But the particularly delightful events were when the master personally led the boys for a ramble through the hills. Twice that day, he sprinted and scampered here and there with the boys as if he were actually one of them, and sent many a thrill of boyish glee into their little hearts, and thus proved his perfection from yet another point of view, which is so pithily conveyed by Swami Vivekananda in these fine words, quote, "The true teacher, Sadguru, Kutub, is he who brings himself from the height of God realization down to the level of the student, sees through the student's eyes, hears through the student's ears," end quotes. But this delight was greatly marred by the apparent mishap in the evening, when the master set out for the second ramble. After going for about a mile right to the heart of the valley, he suddenly became very indisposed. Before anyone could even guess as to what had happened, the master was all limp and almost superconscious. There's an asterisk. Shall I read the asterisk?
Yes, please.
Okay, it's right there. When Hazra Babajan of Pune was pleased to bless the master with her glance of grace in the year 1914, he became all at once superconscious. But it was in the year 1921 that his second guru, Sri Sadguru Upasni Maharaj, restored him the consciousness of the mental, subtle, and gross planes. Since then, His Holiness has always been in the superconscious plus complete gross conscious state, which is called Sahaj Samadhi, and which the Holy Quran calls the state of Kamila, perfected. And such a fit of losing only the gross consciousness implies no change or difference in that ever conscious state of Sahaj Samadhi. In Truth Tells, it appeared to be one of the divine fits with which the master seemed to have been affected now and then since Ali was snatched away. But the present one was far greater in severity than the previous ones, inasmuch as the master had actually to be carried back to the dak bungalow on the disciples' shoulders, and came to normal state long after sunset. From the 7th of March, 1928, the atmosphere once again became quite normal at Meher Ashram. Mr. R.K. Irani left Mehrabad that evening for Bombay, whence he proceeded to England on the 10th of that month. But with all this, quite a lull came over the place in the matter of divine conflagration, which no longer was there. Not that the hearts already affected were cooled down, but the spectacular conflagration gave place to silent smoldering, which again remained restricted to a particular view without affecting others, as it did in the month of January last. In the course of the discussion on the 19th of March, 1928, already mentioned in chapter 1, the master had also conveyed, quotes, "These sparks of love that have been sprinkled can never be put out. Some kindling through personal efforts is necessary. Once kindled sufficiently, instead of dying out, it will go on increasing automatically without even thinking about it, and to such a pitch that one affected with it will desire nothing save the cooling down of its heat. Just see Ali Akbar. Now you will understand what he means by often repeating, quote, I don't want God, I don't want anything. I only cool down this all-consuming fire in my heart, end quote. To cool this heat or fire means to render the person unconscious. And this is the intermediate state between heat and light. but I am not going to cool it down just yet. The last stage, light, means after becoming unconscious, those who are burning with the heat of love, will see the light of love. And when they become conscious again, after gaining the final sight or experience, the light of love will remain. But the heat of love of the first stage will vanish away automatically. No more sufferings and agonies then. That is what is going to be done in due course of time. Let us see what comes of the message to the West. Of course, no more spark sprinkling now. Another way, turning the eyes of the newcomers, giving them the light of love without making them pass through the heat of love, simultaneously with the old ones at the time of giving the final touch through the link of a boy amongst these little lovers. Ali is the link through whom newcomers will also get the light of love.
Thanks, Rosalie. Marion, could you
I
unmute?
think this is a good place to stop now.
Oh
You
yeah.
wanna go home?
Yeah.
This is,
We may
Baba
be
is declaring
approaching the
something.
we may be approaching the end of the chapter. It's been a long one. So
Sure.
Marion, why don't you read a page or two anyway and see if we
All right,
make
please,
progress.
please tell me when to stop.
Sure.
Then again, sometime in the same month, I remember once having heard the master conveying these words. Now, at least for 2 months, all will go on as usual, as it was in the beginning of the ashram, play, school studies, etc. No spiritual demonstration. I will not let an outburst happen in the meantime. End of quote. I know these words of the master are hard to be understood fully by the average reader, and their significance would go home to those only who are deeply interested in spirituality. But this much is clear from them. If we also remember the twice quoted remarks of the master, quote, it will all have to be done afresh, quote, that the final touch towards giving the lovers the light of love is withheld for certain reasons, including the devil's work and also the other of awaiting the result of the invitation to the West. That although no new love spark sprinkling will be done, yet since the final outburst was untimely checked, the final process will have to be done all over again, as had been done in the month of December 1927. Yet at the time, none could catch the significance of the remark, doing it afresh, in the deep sense in which it was meant, as the following chapters will show.
Thanks, Marion. We'll pick it up here next time.
So intense, this
Yes, into